This is one of the last remaining fragments of the Great Fen, which once covered vast swathes of East Anglia, and it's the only true bit of fen that's really left in the wonderful open aspect that we can see behind us today.
There are horses grazing the National Nature Reserve and the restoration land, and there's been virtually no work at all done on dispersal of seeds through the guts of animals, which is technically called endozoochory, but you could just call it poo picking if you liked. There's been virtually no work done on what actually is transported by cattle and horses grazing this very species-rich habitat. So I thought it'd be very interesting to look through poo for 12 months and see what came out the other end.
The breed of horse that we have here is known as the Conic Polski. It's an Eastern European breed of horse. They're very robust. They've got very, very tough constitutions, so they'll take things that domestic horses wouldn't necessarily eat, so things like nettles, thistles, rushes, as well as the sort of really sweet grasses that most horses love.
They're just around to wander year-round wherever they want. That means that they can disperse plants from relatively long distances. It takes at least 3 days for it to pass through the system. And so potentially they can transport seeds from one area to an area quite a long way away, which otherwise the seeds wouldn't have a chance to get to. Now, on the National Nature Reserve, I've taken fresh samples of their poo once every month for a year to try and understand what they're eating and what seed that comes out the other end is viable to germinate the following year. And in that way, we hope to understand what the animals can disperse from a relatively species-rich habitat of the National Nature Reserve across to the restoration land, which is relatively species-poor at the moment. The samples that I've collected, I have to store them in a cold room for a certain amount of days, then I have to dry them out, store them in a freezer. Eventually they end up here in the Botanical Gardens at Cambridge University. The conditions in here are set up so that they mimic fairly well the conditions outdoors, even though we're in a greenhouse. You can see there's a fair amount of germination. What tends to come in first are the grasses and the rushes. There's always, particularly with rushes, thousands and thousands of seeds are produced by each plant. So there's a very good chance, and they're very, very small as well. It's a good chance they'll pass through the gut system, come out the other end and germinate. So what we've got here is quite a few rushes and grasses. The herbs are just beginning to come in now. This is broadleaf plantain. Over here we've got some willow herbs and various other herbs which are associated with wetland environments, not particularly rare. So nothing particularly rare is coming in at the moment. The fact that anything's germinating is a start. So we know that they're transporting certain species, and I very much hope that by the end of this summer we'll see relatively scarce herbs germinating, maybe in quite small numbers, but enough so that we understand that they can survive the process through the gut system, through the poo, out the other end, and have the potential to germinate.
If we look back at natural mechanisms, this is what happened in nature, and we think that, when large animals were prevalent in the landscape, that's how a lot of these species would have gone, how they have moved around and colonised new areas. So I think it's really exciting what we're trying to do here, and it could be a really, realistic mechanism of how we get the species that are here out onto those new grounds.